Welcome to Sonya Podcast. Welcome to Women History Month. I'm doing Women History Month for March. And our Women History Month is a Native American. Her name is Muriel Miguel. And her sisters Gloria and Lisa Mayo. They are Bohemian of Brownstone in Brooklyn. They are Indonesia's rodeo riders and Wild Wild West actors. They grew up under the kitchen table and a future experienced theater director. They performed in the mid-1900s. There's an Okay, so let me tell you about Miss Miguel. Still remember sitting under the kitchen table and listening to her parents trading songs and stories with these visitors. Sitting Bull grandson Crazy Bull, a national archery champion who advised Rogers and Hammerstein on their production of Annie Get Your Gun, was an occasional presence. Douglas Grant, a trick rider from South Dakota, got stranded in New York while on tour with the rodeo and ended up staying with the Miguels for 2 decades. And then there was this Big Mountain, a family of the Mohawk Comisha dancers who live in the back of a gift shop at so-called Indian Village in Wild West City, a theme park that still lies off Route 206 in New Jersey. As a young woman, Miss Miguel mostly felt embarrassed by the work her parents and their friends did for money, jobs that required them to dress up in ceremonial costumes and act out white people fantasies of how Indians behave. But now at 84, she wondered if the fake Indian Village and Wild West shows of that era inadvertently contribute to the survival of real Native culture. If only by bringing such a vibrant community together in New York at a time when the authorities out west were forbidding Native people from practicing their traditions. Miss Miguel family and friends share their songs and stories freely with one another, planning what Miss Miguel described as kernels of inspiration in their children. Today I'm collecting corn, she said, and it's overwhelming. Miss Miguel doing a break for rehearsal of Misdemeanor Dreams for the New York Times. Miss Miguel and her 2 older sisters, Gloria 95 and Lisa Mayo, who died in 2013 at 89, have often been described as the matriarchs of Indonesia theater in North America. They made a space for so many people and companies. Penny Cucci, an actor and choreographer of Mohawk ancestries, said they made no apologies for the way that we tell stories. In recent weeks, Miss Miguel has been scrambling to finish preparing for the debut of her latest production, Misdemeanor Dreams, a collaboration between her company, Spider Woman Theater, and an arts group led by Miss Cucci and her husband, Sid Bob. Will open on March 10th at Lamar, the experimental theater in the East Village, represent the culmination of her life work so far, she says. Miss Miguel has been working in the world of experimental theater since the 60s when she was an actor in the Open Theater, a pioneer ensemble found by the visionary director Joseph Chaikin. Like many of her past projects, the new play explores the way in which old stories shape the lives of Indonesian people in the present, for better and worse, inspired by Midsummer Night Dreams. It takes place in a magical realm where fairies, humans, and other beings share stories drawn from the performer, ancestral traditions, and personal memories. A father disappearing in the wilderness of northern Quebec, a mother spurns her daughter because she's afraid of losing her. The performers, who trace their roots to a dozen Indonesian nations within the borders of the United States, Canada, and the Philippines, create the piece using the story-weaving method Spider Woman. Theater developed the technique in the 1970s when the group was a fixture of the downtown theater screen. Over the years, the company has used it to entwine narratives about everything from family violence to cultural appropriation with pop songs and bawdy jokes and dreamlike images. So that's Miss Miguel. So she's saying that she's telling everyone about being a Native American and how her and her sister was actually actresses during the 60s and 70s. And she go on to say, on a recent Monday, Miss Miguel took a break from her research schedule to ride around her neighborhood telling stories about her own childhood. She sat in the back of 2012 Toyota Matrix, a red leather hat trimmed with wolf fur resting on the seat beside her. Miss Miguel has short silvery hair and a cascading, shoulder-shaking laugh. She wore turquoise rings on most of all her fingers and a mismatched earring, one turquoise, the other made of oyster shells. "I don't like sameness," she said. Heading down the Court Street, she pointed at Carver Hill Cinema, a long-time movie theater that used to be called the Lido. That was one of the places that my father used to stand outside in his outfit to ballyhole all these movies. She recalled her father, a cuna from Panama, would supplement the money he earned as a duck worker by donning the war bonnet of a Plains Indian chief and beckon people into the theater to see the latest John Wayne picture. He has lots of jobs like that, playing a genetic Indian at Thanksgiving pageants, performing at ceremonies, commemorating the supposed sales of Manhattan to the Dutch. In the summer, he would take Miss Miguel's older sisters to Golden City, a long since forgotten amusement park in the Canarsie neighborhood of Brooklyn, where they would dance and sing and sit around in teepees. Gloria, who played the role of the elder in Miss Demeanor Dreams, dread these outings. People would come and look and say, "Oh, look at the Indians, they're eating spaghetti," she recalled. It turned her off from doing any theater work that involved her heritage until, as a divorced mother of two in her late 40s, she joined her sister in establishing Spider-Woman Theater. "We go to tell our stories in our own way," she said. So she also goes on to talk about her mother's tradition, wrapper knock dress, on the corner of State and Nevin Street. Miss Miguel noted that the surrounding blocks have been home to a community known as the Chongwanga. In the first half of the 20th century, Mohawk iron workers from Canada settled in the area while helping to build the skyscrapers that now dominate the skyline. The Empire State Building, the Chrysler Rockefeller Plaza. The Reverend Dave M. Corey, a white pastor who learned Mohawk and gave sermons in the language, allowed Miss Miguel and her friends to rehearse authentic native dances in the basement of a church a few blocks away. They formed a dance group, the Little Eagles, that eventually grew into the Thunderbird American Indian Dancers, a widely known company that still performs and teaches at school, theaters, and museums. As her car pulls up to the corner where the church once stood, Miss Miguel, "Ay," she said, a wooden construction barrier guarded white condo complex that would not have looked out of place in Miami. Miss Miguel got out and approached a young man who stood outside the gate in a hard hat, smoking a Newport. "Excuse me," she said. "What happened to the church that used to be here?" "It got abandoned a few years back," he said, in an accent that proves to be Turkish. "How sad," she said. "When I was growing up, a lot of the people who live here or on the next block was native people, Indian people." He nodded politely. "It was really wonderful," Miss Miguel said. She spent the next 10 minutes regaling him with interest facts and anecdotes about the time she praised the minister, a socialist who let them use the space to dance and laugh about how the iron workers would pile into their cars for the 12-hour trip back to their reservations every weekend, switching seats while driving so they wouldn't have to waste time pulling over. "Crazy men," she said. The contractor gave her a complimented look. "I didn't know there were native people living in the neighborhood," he remarked. She studied his face. "You didn't know?" She shared a few more details and thanked him for listening. Walking back to the car, she called out, "Tell the people the story." So that was a great lady in to talk about for women history. There's a whole place in Brooklyn, New York that they didn't know actually lived Native Americans. So she was basically telling her story. So I'd like to thank you for listening to my podcast. Please give it a 5-star review on Speakers, Spotify, Anchors, wherever you listen to your podcast. Please share, Please go to my website, http://podcasters.com/wordpress.com. Go to these websites, www.avilo. Use promo code Sonia, www Instacart 156. If you'd like to buy me a coffee, you can buy me a coffee. Go to my you can follow me at son.ia9795 Instagram, Sonia Santiago Twitter, Sonia Santiago YouTube, Sonia Santiago Pinterest, Sonia Santiago Facebook. Have a blessed day and much love.